My name is Rowan, and last week while I was sitting in the courtyard of Johns Hopkins Hospital waiting for news about my husband, Elliot Gray, who was fighting hour by hour against a rare bone marrow disease, a stranger walked up, leaned down and whispered, "Your husband, you're not his only family." Elliot had grown up in foster care, spending his whole life believing he was completely orphaned. If what she said was true, it could be his only chance to survive, or a secret that would shatter everything. Have you ever had a moment when just one sentence completely changed your life? Leave a comment, hit like, and subscribe to follow the rest of the story. I still remember that fateful day clearly. A fall afternoon in Austin, Texas, with soft golden sunlight spilling over the small streets. I had finished a hospital shift, exhausted enough to want nothing but to go home, but a friend pulled me into a family diner on the corner. The place was small, the wooden tables and chairs worn with time, the scent of fresh-baked pie mingling with rich coffee. I was searching for a quiet spot when the door swung open and Elliot walked in. His eyes met mine for a split second, but it was enough to make me forget I was breathing. He wore a faded flannel shirt holding a small wooden box. I'd later learn it was a drawer he had fixed for a customer. He came over to my table with a gentle smile and asked in a warm, deep voice, "Is this seat taken?" I shook my head. And like that, between the clink of dishes, the scent of pastries, and the country music playing on the radio, we began talking. He told me about the small woodworking shop on the outskirts of town, where he worked from early morning until late at night. I told him about my long shifts, the children I cared for in pediatrics. We laughed when we realized we both hated olives but loved peach cobbler. That night, I went home with a strange feeling, as if I had unexpectedly met someone I'd known for years. In the months that followed, Elliot became an inseparable part of my life. He would show up at my door with a jar of honey from the farmer's market or a bundle of wildflowers wrapped in newspaper. Once he quietly left a book in my mailbox, the one I had mentioned only once during that diner conversation. When he proposed, we didn't have a grand ceremony. It was a spring afternoon under an old oak tree with a few close friends, and I wore a simple dress my mother had sewn. Elliot cried when he saw me walking toward him. No holding back, no hiding, because he had never believed that love needed to be restrained. We bought an old wooden house at the edge of the woods with rotting walls, a leaky roof and creaking floors. But Elliot saw it as an uncut gem. He spent entire weekends scraping paint, replacing floorboards and rebuilding door frames. Every evening we sat on the porch listening to crickets and watching fireflies flicker in the dark. One night he handed me a newly built rocking chair, the wood smooth and sturdy, and said, "For you, so every time you sit down you'll remember this is our home." Life seemed peaceful, but inside it carried cracks no one could see. 3 times I became pregnant and 3 times I lost the baby. Each time, hope barely had a chance to grow before it was ripped away, leaving an emptiness nothing could fill. I would sit for hours in the bathroom holding a pregnancy test that had changed color, crying until I had no strength left. One evening I said through sobs, "You deserve a full family, Elliot. A wife who can give you children." He was silent for a moment, then gently lifted my chin so I could meet his eyes. "You are my family. I don't need anyone else." Elliot never let pain turn him bitter. Instead, he suggested we consider adoption. He told me about the children in the foster care system, the very place he had grown up. No parents, no one coming to pick them up during the holidays. He spoke with a calm tone, but I could sense the thin layer of ice covering a very deep memory. I once asked him about his biological parents. He gave a faint smile. "They didn't want me from the start. I don't want to find them only to hear that again." Then he held my hand tightly as if to say, "We're enough." We went on living, trying to patch the broken pieces with small routines. Sunday mornings with coffee on the porch. Friday afternoons walking around the lake. During those times I would catch him gazing into the woods as if searching for something, or someone he never named. Between us there was still a gap. Not because love was lacking, but because we both knew there was a part of Elliot's past that had never been touched. And I, no matter how much I loved him, could not replace that. But back then I didn't know that very gap would become the key to everything. When Elliot fell ill, when his time was being measured in days, that gap was no longer part of a story already closed. It was the only door to a fragile hope. At first I thought it was overwork. Elliot had never known how to rest. He could stand in his workshop for 10 hours straight, then still have enough energy to cook dinner and ask me, How was your day? But then I began noticing small but frightening changes. He came home earlier, his steps slower, and sometimes when he thought I wasn't looking, he would lean on the table and sigh as if trying to catch his breath. One night, I touched his arm and felt bruises. Not like normal bumps, but spreading under the skin like grayish-purple clouds. Where did these come from? I asked, trying to keep my voice calm. He gave a strange smile. Probably bumped into the workbench. It's nothing, R. But it's nothing quickly turned into nights where he panted for breath, drenched in sweat, and once I woke at 2 a.m. to find him hunched over, holding his chest. At that moment, the nurse in me took over my fear. I didn't ask his opinion anymore. The next morning, I took him straight to the hospital. The tests came one after another, so much blood drawn that I saw him press his lips together to endure it. When the doctor called me into a private room, my heart dropped. On the desk was a thick file, and his expression told me everything before he spoke a word. Rowan, your husband has severe aplastic anemia. His bone marrow has almost stopped producing blood cells. I gripped the chair tightly, feeling the room shrink around me. What can we do to treat it? I asked, my voice hoarse. The best, almost only, option is a bone marrow transplant. And for it to work, we need a donor who's a close genetic match. Usually, siblings have the highest chance. He paused, looking me straight in the eyes. But I understand Elliot's case is more complicated. My throat tightened. Elliot had no one. No parents, no siblings, not a single name to call. The doctor went on, his voice gentle but unbearably heavy. We'll search the National Registry. But you have to understand, finding a match could take many months, and Elliot doesn't have that much time. I walked out, my legs heavy. Elliot was sitting in the waiting area, holding a magazine but not reading a word. When I came over, he looked up and tried to smile. Any news? I couldn't tell him the truth. Not yet. I sat down beside him and held his hand tightly. They're still reviewing the results. They'll call us in soon. His eyes searched mine for something, but then he simply nodded and squeezed my hand. In the days that followed, we were caught in a loop between the hospital and home. Elliot grew visibly weaker. Each transfusion made him look a little better, but within days the color drained from his face again. I started working night shifts at the hospital so I could be with him during the day, even though I was so tired that sometimes I stood under the shower and couldn't remember if I had already washed my hair. One evening, while I was clearing the dinner table, Elliot called from the living room. Rowan, have you noticed I've been sleeping more lately? I froze, forcing a steady tone. Your body needs rest, that's a good thing. He smiled, but I could see the doubt in his eyes. Elliot wasn't someone who was easily fooled, he was giving me time to say the truth. And me, every time I walked out of his hospital room, I felt like I was betraying him by not telling him that time was running out. But I also knew that if I did, the weight of it would crush him before the illness ever could. That night, after he had fallen asleep, I sat at the kitchen table, opened my laptop, and registered Elliot's information with every bone marrow donor database I could find. I read each question about family history and ancestry, and every time I stopped at the box that asked, number of biological siblings. A cold, unchanging 0. I thought of the doctor's words, a few more weeks, or there would be no chance left. That sentence replayed in my head like a painful heartbeat. I didn't know how yet, only that I couldn't stop searching. Outside the window, the night in the wooded outskirts was so still that even the sound of the wind against the eaves felt eerie. I pressed my hands to my face, closed my eyes for a long time and told myself, I have to keep him here no matter what it takes. I was sitting in the hospital courtyard, my hands wrapped around a cup of coffee gone cold, when a shadow stopped in front of me. A woman, probably in her 40s, with long, slightly messy brown hair, wearing a thick coat still dusted with road dirt. Her eyes locked onto mine as if she recognized something. You're the wife of Elliot Gray, aren't you? Her voice was low, a little hoarse, with a hint of hesitation, but still clear enough for me to hear over the sound of an ambulance in the distance. I flinched slightly. I didn't know her. How did she know Elliot's name? Yes. I'm Rowan. Is something wrong? She glanced quickly toward the hospital doors, lowering her voice as if afraid someone might overhear. I used to work at a small gas station in a remote Wyoming town. There, I saw a man who looked exactly like your husband. Not kind of similar, so alike that if they stood next to each other, you'd think they were twins. I held my breath. All these years, Elliot had insisted he had no one. The thought of a stranger who looked exactly like him turned everything inside me upside down. I tried to stay calm. Maybe it's nothing more than a coincidence. People can look alike. No, she shook her head. He kept to himself, didn't like contact with anyone. But there's one detail I can't forget: a long scar across the back of his left hand. My heart pounded. Elliot had that scar. A thin but distinct line from when a knife slipped while he was making a wooden table during our first year living together. That wasn't something easily duplicated. I looked at her, my voice starting to shake. Are you saying he could be related to Elliot? She stayed silent for a few seconds as if weighing her words. Then she reached into her coat pocket, pulled out a folded piece of paper and placed it in my hand. This is an address. I can't promise it's the answer. But if you really want to save him, go before it's too late. I gripped the paper, feeling the numbers of the address press into my palm. Why are you telling me this? I asked, still unsure if this was real. Marissa, she told me her name, gave a sad smile. Because I once missed the chance to save someone. And it's the thing I'll regret for the rest of my life. She stood, adjusted her bag. I have to go. Good luck, Rowan. I watched her disappear into the crowd, the cold wind carrying the scent of gasoline from the road ahead, reminding me of long drives from years ago. The piece of paper in my hand felt heavier by the second. When I returned to the hospital room, Elliot was asleep, his breathing steady but weak. I sat beside his bed, my hand resting over his. Every thought in my mind circled back to one question. If the man in Wyoming really is connected, could he be the key to saving Elliot's life? That night I couldn't sleep. The steady beeps of Elliot's heart monitor filled the room, but to me each sound felt like it was counting down the time we had left. With every passing minute I became more certain. I couldn't sit here. I unfolded the paper. Marissa's handwriting wasn't neat, but I made out the words. County Road 14, outskirts of Red Creek, Wyoming. A place I had never been. I took out my phone and pulled up satellite images. The road into town was narrow, surrounded by forests and mountains. A remote area with few residents. No wonder someone living there could avoid notice for years. The next morning I went to the head of my department to request emergency leave. She looked at me with deep sympathy. Rowan, I know Elliot's situation. Go. I'll handle things here. I went home and packed a few things into a bag. Clothes, Elliot's medical records, and a photo of him at 20 years old. Something I could show if I needed to compare faces. Before leaving, I returned to the hospital. Elliot woke as I walked in. He gave me a tired smile. You look like you're about to go into battle. I took his hand, replying softly, maybe I am. Get some rest. I'll be back soon. He looked like he was about to ask something more, but I leaned down and kissed his forehead. Trust me. As I walked out of the room, I knew I had just stepped into a journey whose outcome no one could predict. But I also knew that if someone in Wyoming truly looked that much like Elliot, I had to find out the truth. And I had to do it now before his time ran out. I left Nashville while it was still pitch dark. The road stretched ahead like a ribbon of black glass under the headlights. I didn't turn on music, listening only to the hum of the engine and the wind slipping through the door seals, keeping my mind fixed on what was coming. 12 hours of driving through snow-covered mountain ranges brought me into Wyoming as the sun dipped low. The air here was heavier, laced with the scent of burning wood and the cold, sharp bite of the mountains. Red Creek was so small it took less than 10 minutes to drive from one end to the other. The main road was cracked asphalt, lined with a few old shops, a grocery store, a diner, and a tractor repair shop. People moved slowly, but their eyes flicked past me quickly as if avoiding contact. I stopped at the only diner still open. The waitress, a woman in her 50s with neatly tied silver hair, set a cup of coffee in front of me without asking for an order. When I asked about a man living alone on the edge of town, her eyes narrowed slightly. There are plenty of folks here who keep to themselves. Who are you looking for? I took Elliot's photo from my wallet and set it on the table. She glanced at it, then quickly busied herself with my cup. I don't know. Her tone was firm, but her hand tightened on the mug's handle and I knew she was hiding something. I paid and left, feeling the eyes of other customers follow me out. After circling town and getting nothing but evasive answers, I finally found a lead at the post office. The clerk, a thin man with glasses slipping down his nose, paused for a beat too long when he saw the photo. He took a sip of coffee, then lowered his voice. If you really want to find him, take the dirt road north until you cross an old wooden bridge. You'll see an abandoned cabin on the mountainside. But, he hesitated, not everyone is welcome there. I thanked him and noted the directions. Snow was falling heavier now, covering the uneven dirt road. Tall, dark pines loomed like walls and the old bridge appeared, so weathered it shook as my car crossed. Just a few turns from the mountainside, a black pickup truck suddenly shot out from a side road, blocking my path. My brakes screeched, my heart slamming against my ribs. The driver got out, a tall, broad man in his 40s, his thick coat dusted with snow. His eyes swept over me coldly, lingering longer than necessary. Where are you from? His voice was low and rough, each word dropping like stones into the snow. I'm just looking for the cabin on the mountainside. I tried to keep my voice steady. He stepped closer, his shadow falling across my hood. If you're smart, you'll turn around right now. Around here, there are things you're better off staying out of. I gripped the steering wheel but didn't back away. I met his eyes. Thanks for the advice. But I have to keep going. The silence stretched on, broken only by the wind and the thud of snow hitting the roof of the car. Finally he smirked, a smile with no warmth at all. Suit yourself. But don't say I didn't warn you. He turned back to the pickup, backed it up enough for me to pass. I drove forward slowly, but I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. In the rearview mirror, his truck still sat there, headlights cutting through the falling snow. The road up the mountainside grew narrower, the tires squealing against a layer of hard ice. At last, after a sharp bend, the cabin appeared, standing alone in a clearing surrounded by bare pine stumps. The roof slanted, some boards peeled away by the wind, but a thin wisp of smoke rose from the chimney, proof someone was inside. I cut the engine, sat still for a few seconds, my hand gripping Elliot's photo. I didn't know who would be on the other side of that door, or whether it would be hope or something entirely different. But I knew I had come too far to turn back. I stepped out of the car, the crunch of breaking snow beneath my boots loud in the stillness of the mountainside. Cold wind slipped under my collar, carrying the scent of burning wood from the chimney. The wooden steps creaked under my weight, my hand trembling slightly, but not from the cold. I knocked twice. At first there was only the wind and the distant bark of a dog. I was about to knock a third time when the squeal of old hinges broke the silence. The door opened a crack and a tall man appeared. His dark blonde hair was slightly messy, falling over his forehead. But it was his eyes that froze me in place, clear blue, deep and so familiar they made my chest tighten. They were Elliot's eyes. Who are you? His voice was deep, slightly hoarse, the tone of someone unused to talking to strangers. I pulled Elliot's photo from my coat pocket and held it out to him. This is my husband. His name is Elliot Gray. The man took the photo. For a moment, every expression on his face seemed to lock in place. He stared at the picture, then looked up at me, something unnameable flickering in his eyes. He's alive. His voice shook as if he were speaking of something he had buried deep for years. I thought my brother died 30 years ago. I was stunned. I had come here hoping to find a relative of Elliot's, but hearing those words still felt like a blade to the chest. Your brother. I repeated, barely able to believe it. I'm Noah Bennett. Elliot, if that's his name. Our mother had a baby boy when I was 6. But a few hours later she signed the papers to leave him at the hospital. I never saw him again. Why would she abandon him? Noah leaned against the doorframe, his gaze drifting toward the snow-covered pines. My mother, she wasn't strong. She owed money and was being threatened by a powerful man in our old town. He told her if she didn't give up the baby he'd handle it himself. She was so scared she couldn't keep him. He tightened his grip on the photo. I don't know who he was, only remember his large shadow standing in the hospital hallway that day. Later, whenever I asked, she would avoid the question. My hands felt icy, and not from the snow. Everything I thought I knew about Elliot's life trembled, as if ready to form an entirely different picture. Elliot, I began, but my voice caught. He's in critical condition. The doctors say he has severe bone marrow failure and needs a transplant urgently. Without a blood relative, the chances of finding a match are almost zero. In his eyes, I saw suspicion, confusion, and something that looked like a sudden, heavy sense of responsibility. And you think, I could save him. I didn't say anything more. Wasted words would only cost time. Noah stood still for a long time as if wrestling with himself. Then he drew in a deep breath, his arms tightening at his sides. If he's really my brother, I won't walk away. But I need to know more. He opened the door wider, motioning me inside. The cabin was simple, filled with the warm scent of burning wood. The fireplace blazed, casting golden light across walls lined with a few old photos. We sat at the kitchen table. I pulled a few pictures of Elliot from my bag. Our wedding photo, a shot of him in his workshop. Noah studied each one carefully, his finger pausing over the one where Elliot was smiling, holding a puppy. That smile, he said softly, it's exactly the same as when our mother bought me my first toy truck. Noah stayed silent for a long time after telling me the story of the last time he saw Elliot. Or rather, the baby he thought had vanished from his life 30 years ago. His fingers kept turning the photo I had given him, his eyes never leaving the face in it, as if memorizing every line. I took a deep breath. It was time to say it outright, even knowing it would cut deep. Noah, Elliot doesn't have much time. The doctors say his bone marrow has almost completely shut down. His only chance is a transplant from a blood relative. He slowly lifted his head, a flicker of caution lighting his blue eyes. And you think, I could be that person. I don't think. I believe it. I met his gaze. You are Elliot's brother. If you agree to testing and if we're lucky, you could save his life. Noah leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms. A few seconds of silence passed before his low, rough voice came again. Rowan, it's not the first time I've heard promises from family. I once trusted someone who shared my name and it dragged me into trouble. I lost nearly all my work, my friends, and almost my freedom because I trusted the wrong person. Since then, I swore never to let blood ties be an excuse for being used again. I leaned forward, keeping my voice steady but firm. I didn't come here to use you. I came here for Elliot. He's never known he had a sibling. His whole life he believed he was completely alone. I can't let him leave this world without knowing the truth, and without a chance to be saved. His face was unreadable, but his hand on the table tightened slightly. And if I refuse? He asked quietly. I swallowed against the lump in my throat. Then I'll walk out of here and spend every second left trying to find someone else. But I'll have to live with the question. If Noah had said yes, would it have been different? And I think you would too. I heard the wind lash against the windows, the rich scent of wood smoke filling the room from the fireplace. He didn't speak, only stared out at the white world beyond the glass. I sighed, stood, and reached for my coat. Thank you for hearing me out. Rowan. I stopped. Noah stood there, his shoulders slightly lowered, but his eyes had changed. No longer the cold wall from earlier. I'll do the test. He spoke slowly as if making sure he wouldn't take it back. But before you start celebrating, there's something you need to know. Elliot, he's not my only sibling. I frowned. What do you mean? Noah braced his hands on the table, his head bowed for a few seconds before he looked up. We have a younger sister, Clara. She's 6 years younger than me. But she disappeared when she was 16. A chill ran down my spine, though the fire still blazed hot. Missing. One fall morning she left for school, and never came back. The police said maybe she ran away. But I know Clara wasn't the kind to leave without a word. I searched everywhere, from registries in other states to old news archives. Nothing. I eased back into my chair, my mind spinning with what I had heard. Elliot had no idea. His whole life he had believed he had no one, when in truth, there was a brother sitting in front of me and a sister somewhere out there. Noah went on, if Claire's alive, she's Elliot's blood too. Who knows, she might be an even better match than me. But finding her now is impossible. We have to save Elliot first. Then we go now. Noah grabbed his coat, locked the door, and stepped out with me. Outside, the snow still fell thick, but this time it didn't feel as bitter as before. The road back to Nashville suddenly carried a different meaning. It wasn't just the trip to get a test done. It was the first step toward piecing together a family that had been scattered for more than 3 decades. We arrived back in Nashville late in the afternoon, snow clinging white to the side mirrors and both sides of the car. When we stepped into the hospital's testing unit, Noah showed almost no sign of nerves, just nodded at the nurse and let them draw his blood. He moved through everything neatly without many questions, as if he had already prepared himself. I waited outside, fingers laced together, eyes fixed on the testing room door. Every minute felt like an hour. When the doctor came out with a file in his hand, I almost jumped to my feet. "The results show he's a very good match," the doctor said, the corner of his mouth lifting in a faint smile. "We'll begin preparations for the transplant." Relief flooded through me, like I could finally breathe after days of being held under. But it didn't last long. My phone buzzed. An unknown number. I stepped into the hall to answer. Rowan Gray. The man's voice on the other end was low and rough. "Yes, this is she." "Who is this?" "That's not important. But you need to hear this. Don't let Noah Bennett near Elliot. He's not here to save anyone." I froze, my hand tightening around the phone. "What are you talking about?" "Look into his past in Red Creek. Before you put your husband's life in that man's hands." Then the line went dead. Noah's own words about being used by family came back to me, but this time they twisted in my head differently. Was he hiding something more? Or was this a lie to sabotage Elliot's chance? When I returned to the waiting area, Noah was speaking with a nurse, his expression calm. Seeing me, he asked, "Everything okay?" I didn't want to say anything then. Inside me, two thoughts collided violently. One telling me this was the only person who could save Elliot and medical results didn't lie. The other reminding me of cases I'd seen in the hospital, the ones that seemed safe but hid danger born of blind trust. I found the lead transplant doctor and asked quickly, If there's reason to doubt a donor even with a good match, do we have another option? Time doesn't allow us to find someone else. If we delay, the risk of Elliot not making it is extremely high." That answer felt like a sentence. I walked out, my heart pounding. There wasn't much time left to think. When I returned to Elliot's room, he was asleep, his breathing faint. His skin was so pale I had to sit down right beside him and take his cold hand in mine. Only minutes later, the monitor's beeping changed. Faster, urgent. The nurse rushed in, shouting, "He's going into respiratory failure." Everything moved in a blur. They wheeled Elliot down the hall toward the ER. I was kept outside, listening to the doctor's rapid orders. A moment later, the lead doctor stepped out, his face tense. "We have to do the transplant now. This is his only chance." I turned and saw Noah already there, eyes locked on the operating room door. He didn't ask a single question, only said, "Let me do it." I searched his face for the answer I needed. I didn't see deceit, only a cold resolve, as if he was ready to face whatever waited inside. In that brief moment, I knew doubts could wait, but Elliot's life could not. "Go, Noah." He nodded, then disappeared with the nurse through the OR doors. I stood there, leaning against the wall, my mind full of unanswered questions, but clinging to the fragile hope that when those doors opened again, Elliot would still be with me. The transplant took hours, so long I lost all sense of time. When the doors finally opened and the doctor came out looking relieved, I realized I'd been holding my breath. The procedure went well. "Now we wait for Elliot to recover and for his body to accept the new marrow," he said. Noah was wheeled out too, still hooked to and for, but he looked at me and gave a slight nod as if to say, "I kept my word." A few days later, when Elliot began to wake and could speak, I stepped into the hall for some air. My phone rang, an unknown number again. I answered and the voice made me freeze. "Rowan, it's Marissa." I moved into a quiet corner, lowering my voice. "It was you who called me before the transplant? Warned me about Noah?" "Yes," Marissa sighed. "And I'm sorry I didn't explain right away. I was doing it at someone's request." "Who?" "Clara. Elliot's sister. She's alive." "She is. But she's in hiding. She believes Noah was involved in the death of their biological father. Clara won't contact Elliot directly because she's afraid it would put him in danger. So she asked me to keep watch on Noah, and if I saw anything suspicious, to warn you." I leaned against the wall, my mind spinning with questions. Marissa continued, "I know Noah saved Elliot. But before you trust him completely, hear the whole story. Clara will reach out to you soon." That night, when I returned to the hospital, Noah was sitting beside Elliot's bed, telling him stories of their childhood in Red Creek. When Elliot fell back asleep, I stepped forward, meeting Noah's gaze. "You need to explain to me right now." Noah didn't look away. He leaned back in his chair and sighed. I know who called you. Clara thinks you had something to do with your father's death. Noah's eyes darkened, but his voice stayed steady. My father didn't die in an accident. He was murdered. And the man behind it was the same one who forced my mother to abandon Elliot. He wanted to erase all ties my mother had to his family. When I started digging into it, Clara was too young. I was afraid if she found out, she'd go to him and she wouldn't come back. Then why would Clara think you were the killer? Because I stayed silent. Noah looked down at his hands. I said nothing for years, to protect her and to keep myself alive. But my wordless distance made her believe the worst. His voice dropped, tinged with weariness. I don't blame Clara. If I were in her shoes, I might think the same. The next morning, as I sat by Elliot's bed, my phone pinged with an email, no subject line. Inside was a short message. Rowan, this is Clara. Thank you for saving Elliot. I'm sorry for making you doubt Noah, but I had to be sure. When it's safe, I'll meet all of you. Keep Elliot safe for me. Attached was a blurry photo. Clara on a narrow street, scarf covering most of her face, but her blue eyes, the same as Elliot's and Noah's. I didn't know when Clara would appear, or where the story between the three siblings would lead. But I knew one thing for certain. Elliot's life had been saved, and a family thought lost was slowly being stitched back together, even with knots still to untangle. That winter's snow fell heavier than in years past, but our little wooden house felt warmer than ever. The fireplace crackled, cinnamon tea scented the air. Elliot was stronger, color in his cheeks, brightness in his eyes, and each time he smiled, the crow's feet I had once feared I'd never see again returned. Late in the day, Elliot, Noah, and I settled under blankets on the porch bench, watching snow cover the yard. Snowflakes clung to Noah's dark blonde hair, and he didn't bother brushing them away. Elliot leaned forward, his eyes following the drifting flakes. I've spent my whole life looking for a family, and in the end the family found me. I turned to him, took his hand and said softly, sometimes, hope comes from the place we least dare to believe in. Noah smiled faintly, his gaze drifting into the distance. I knew he was thinking of the sister still missing, Clara, and the gap still unfilled. The wind slipped cold through our coats, but I felt warm seeing the two brothers side by side. The invisible distance between them from those early days had faded, replaced by a quiet bond built over nights of talking and piecing together two halves of a childhood. The mail carrier came by, leaving a thick envelope. I picked it up, feeling the paper slightly warm, as if it had been held in someone's hand longer than usual. In the top corner was a simple initial, C. Elliot recognized it immediately. Inside was a handwritten letter, the pen strokes graceful but firm. Elliot, Noah. I've been following news about you both. I know Elliot made it through, and I thank Noah for being there when it mattered. I'm sorry for the past misunderstandings, but I had to be certain everything was safe. I still can't appear now. There are things I need to settle so the past will no longer be a threat to any of us. Enclosed is a photo. We were once a family and we will be a family again. I'll see you when everything is ready. Claire. Elliot pulled out the photo. It was old and faded, but the image was sharp enough to make my throat tighten. A boy of about 7 with bright blue eyes, a younger boy clutching a teddy bear, and a long-haired girl smiling wide. 3 faces sharing undeniable features. Noah's hand brushed the photo, his finger lingering on the girl's face. His voice dropped. She's kept this all these years. Elliot looked at Noah, then placed the photo in his brother's hand. We'll see her again. I could hear the certainty in his voice. Not empty comfort but real belief, the kind he had nearly lost months ago. That night we set the photo on the mantel among our small family keepsakes. The rocking chair Elliot had built, our wedding frame, and a folding knife Noah had brought from Red Creek. Firelight glowed over the picture, making the eyes of the 3 children seem to shine. In our little house, with laughter mixing with the wind outside, I realized that even though Clara wasn't here, her presence was already part of us. And though the road to reunion was still long, we were ready to walk it, together. Maybe every family has its gaps, lost connections, untold stories, or misunderstandings unresolved. But sometimes, as Elliot said, family will find its way back together, no matter how many years or how many turns it takes. Our story wasn't about saving a life. It was about piecing together the fragments of family, proving that blood ties, no matter how buried, can still shine once they're found. And you, what do you think? If you were in my place, would you have the courage to put your trust in someone almost a stranger just because of a shared bloodline? Or would you step back and wait for clearer answers? Share your thoughts in the comments. And if this story touched your heart, don't forget to follow the channel for more stories about life, family, and the moments that can change everything.